What's up, Digilock fam? It's your boy Drew. We are episode 26 of the LZK Lessons Learn, season 2. Super excited. I just want to thank everyone for tuning in and more importantly, all the support. But before we start, I just want to make sure you guys are staying safe and creative at home. I know we're still dealing with this pandemic, but I just want to thank all our subscribers. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. But I'm super excited. My boy John Vincent Salcedo is in the building tonight, and he's not only the homie, but he's a Filipino brother in music. You know, it's great to see another Filipino in the game, and we actually connected back. I think it was like in 2017 or something, or 2018.
Sounds about right.
The Asian American Music Panel, and I remember you had asked that question. You had asked a question, and then we connected outside of that, and we popped it up. Do you remember? Like we sat at that coffee shop outside of like Sony.
Yo, shout out to Birch. I think that was Birch Coffee. I remember that. That was like a good moment.
Birch Coffee, yeah.
We were at Birch Coffee. We just chopped it up. I think we sat there for like a good hour, bro. We were just like, I remember looking up in the time. I was like, oh shit, I was supposed to just grab coffee for like 15 minutes, and I was gone. I was just like, oh man, this is great. It was an insightful conversation for sure.
Yeah, no, it was really cool to like learn about your story, and we'll go into that in this episode. But yeah, it was coffee. It was raining that day, but I was like, yo, it was just really dope to see just another obviously Asian American, let alone more importantly a Filipino in music, but not necessarily just as an artist, but more so on the creative business side. And but we'll go into that. But before we start, how are you? How's the family? How's everyone?
Everything's good, man. Everyone is staying as safe as possible. Everyone's just trying to stay to themselves and really not roam around and kind of just not really like be around people. I think that's really all you can do. That's the only way. And if they are, they're it's like a quick run to the grocery and they're back home. So I think that's how everyone's been living their life. We a lot of FaceTimes, a lot of phone calls, for sure. But everyone's good, thankfully.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, that's the most important thing. Those are the first questions I always ask. I've been quarantined with my family. If you've been quarantined with your parents, I feel you because I'm going through it. I love them, and I'm gonna just leave it there. Before we start, I just want to compliment. I just want to compliment your art, bro. Walk me through some of the things behind your wall, like maybe just like some of the pieces. Like, what do you got?
So I got a good amount, but a lot of it is kind of like what I'm inspired by. You kind of see Ye to the left of me, for the All Falls Down. Wait, yeah, left of me, I guess. All Falls Down, that like really memorable scene. Which kind of like now that you look back at it, like I don't know, like 16, 15 years later, whatever the actual time period is, you're kind of like, with the way things are going right now, you that video just stands out to me a little bit more. But a lot of the pieces here, I'm actually like very proud about, just because they're from like really, really good friends, or things that like we've created internally as part of just like our creative group in our team. To the right with me is Frank Ocean. My lady actually screen printed that. Kimberly Ann screen printed that. Above me is a super exclusive Hope photo from Made in America, shot by S. Balabin, who I like grew up with in this music thing. So she shot it right here. We that was actually a screen print from a clothing design that we were trying to put out a couple of years ago, just because we were inspired by her. But we ended up just kind of like using it as an art piece. So kind of everywhere up and down. I don't want to like keep messing with my camera, but you see Dipset right there, because that was like, that was what I was raised to. That was kind of what gave me any sort of confidence in life. So shout out to Joel's and Jim Jones. And then you have another
Dipset.
S. Dot. Yeah, bro, for real, Dipset. Like that made me, man, for real. Like it showed me a different side of the world. And then you have a Mac Miller exclusive photo from another S. Balabin photo right there, where he shot him like a couple of years ago. But yeah, man, I'm proud of this wall, bro. It's just like music is a big part of my life, so I want to make sure that it's properly represented.
I love that, and we'll go into your those different like moments you talked about, like how the different art pieces represent you. But just for the audience in the digital community, maybe talk a little bit more about your role now, and then we'll go into obviously your journey. But like what do you do now, and some of the things you're working on?
For sure. I'm currently the vice president of digital marketing for Columbia Records. So overlook a lot of digital campaigns for artists like Lil Nas X, Harry Styles, Polo G, Fabio Foreign, Lil TJ. I don't want to leave anybody off because I think everyone is beautiful, and I'm blessed to work with all of them. But the way I love explaining our job, or like at least my job, is like we make sure that we're present on the internet, right? Like
Right.
that's really it. Like you want one line of it, we make sure that our artists are present on the internet, and you see them everywhere you
Right.
go, you experience them everywhere you go, you feel their presence everywhere you go, and that means,
Right.
on social platforms, that's on .coms, that's on different, things that are happening on YouTube, that's on different things that are happening on other content channels and content platforms. But, our job is to make sure our artist is always present. I live by the mantra of like, be above the timeline. And that's kind of how, I look at my job and my role overall, is I
I
want to
love
make sure
that.
that my artists are always above the timeline. And that there's a lot of intricacies that go into that. And this, what I'm saying? Like sometimes we're the ideation people. We
Mhm.
come up with the ideas for the content, we come up with the ideas for what you're kind of approaching, for a release of a song or a video. And then there's times that we're the executors. We work with creatives that have such a full developed vision that all we need to
Right.
do is help them make it happen. So they'll let us know, like, hey, I want this, I'm picturing this, and it's on us to make that happen. So it's a beautiful job, man. I love it. I think it's honestly it's a
Same.
brand new job in music. I think a lot of people don't tend to not understand that, especially with the way that the world is going now. Because I think a couple years ago, not to go into it, but digital marketing was like, how do you work through .coms? And now it's just like an ecosystem. Like you have social platforms, you have partners that are just fully digital content focused, and then you have a whole thing
Right.
now and a whole ecosystem that I think wasn't here. And a lot of these jobs
It
are like,
wasn't.
people are really making this as they go and figuring it out as they go, because it's so brand new.
Yeah, no, you say less, man. I mean, you talk about being above the timeline. that's
Yeah.
that's the goal every day. And I think the biggest thing is that, I think 4 or 5 years ago, they look at digital marketing as like more so digital advertising. It's just like, no, there's so much more to it. And
It's true.
I'm excited to be at, where we're at the forefront of this, and I'm excited to share that with someone like you, and kind of like we can go through ideas and stuff. And that's what's really cool about the digital marketing community in music, that we all know each other.
Yeah, it's a very small amount of us. We only understand, we're the only guys that understand the inside jokes, and there's certain things about it that's like, damn, we're nerds, bro. We're like four of us that get this and just cracking up about it. But it's it's a beautiful
Yeah.
thing, man, for real. Like I love the community that's starting to really form around this, because like you said, man, we all gotta kind of lean on each other. It's brand new, it's a new lane, it's a new phase, and a new way to music to market music. So it's great to kind of just build with everybody.
Yeah, definitely. So, people see you in this obviously leadership position, VP digital over at Columbia, but a lot of folks, they're just like, yeah, how did you get here? And I think that's what's really interesting, because everyone has such a different starting point and journey, and there's nothing that's so cookie cutter about it. Like, particularly in music, I have to say,
That's true.
it's so like different. Everyone's
It's true.
like trajectory is so different. So I wanted to start off with you. I mean, for this particular segment, like, what were those initial inspirations? Everyone has gone through like a favorite song or a favorite project, tape, or was it maybe your parents playing music in your crib? Like, what was those initial experiences in music, and how did you fall in love with music?
I mean, I feel like there's a few touch points. I don't want to say that it came down to a song. I do remember an album, because I've always talked about music as not to be super dramatic about it, but it changed my life, man. Like it really did. I'm somebody that came here from the Philippines when I was 10 years old, turning 11. Like I didn't know how to speak English. I didn't have a I didn't have a culture. I didn't have a
Right.
I didn't know what I was. I moved into a predominantly Black and Spanish neighborhood. I grew up in a lower middle class neighborhood, and I was like, oh, there's no other Filipinos around, there's no other Asians around. What am I? How am I supposed to fit in? And music kind of just became my escape. It was how I learned how to speak English. You know, I couldn't take ESL classes.
Wow.
It was too dramatic. You know, it was too dramatic. It was like you would get called. I don't know if people remember or would know how ESL classes work. So let me just kind of break the picture down, right? Like it'll be
Yes.
fourth period. You'll be like 11 years old, bro. It's fourth period. And a teacher will come into the classroom and they'll single you out. They'll be like, oh yeah, you know, John, you know, you got ESL class for the next 30 minutes. So in front of like the rest of your classmates, which is really just those are your friends, that's your community, you're like 11, you're the only guy
Right.
that they know doesn't speak English. So you're
Man. Yeah.
immediately in the center of being made fun of, you're immediately in the center of being bullied, right? Jokes fly left and right. So, you know, I just didn't go. I was like, fuck it, like I'll just be quiet, you know, and just kind of chill here. And you know, because of music, I learned how to like pick up how to speak English. Like I actually really was able to form sentences and understand how to speak to people through
Wow.
hip hop. You know, that really changed my life for real. Like I remember buying the Saga Continues. That was kind of my how I worked backwards, right? Because you know, like I wouldn't know at that point. So I got I think at that point he was already considered P Diddy. So the Saga Continues comes out with a We Ain't Go with
Yeah.
nowhere. Yeah, so I had that, right?
Oh,
And yeah,
no.
bro, that was the whew. So I had that album, and then that kind of became like my history lesson because I was like, all right, if this dude calls it the Saga Continues, that means that there was probably a bunch of things that happened before this. And that kind of became my like, you know, how I followed hip hop. Because then
Right.
from there, I got introduced to Biggie. Because then I realized so that was kind of like my schooling and my education kind of starting there. But that was like my journey, bro. Like hip hop legitimately changed my life. Like music, but hip hop specifically, it gave me it gave me like a life, bro. Like it taught me how to speak English. It gave me like a place to be a part of it. I was able to relate with certain things because I was coming from a lower middle class. You know, we were like not the richest people in the world. Like my mom was working 2 jobs. There was like so many stories in hip hop where I was like, oh wait, I get that. I can relate to that now, you know, and I understand it. And then the beautiful part about it is a majority of hip hop stories kind of have a winning
Right.
end result, right? So Hov can talk about the struggle, but then you look it back and you're like, damn, bro, you made it. So then it also gave me like, you know, it
Right.
also inspired me to go, okay, so I can do something here. I can be an immigrant here and actually make something out of this if I work hard to figure things out because these guys, these poets that are like breaking these stories down for me told me that I could do it because they did it. Right. So that was just
Right.
kind of my introduction point to music. That was it. Like from there, I just wanted to be a part and be involved.
That's crazy. It's crazy to note because you know, I was also immigrant. I came here when I was 4. So you know, my 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 parents dropped me off preschool, predominantly Jewish preschool. I was so confused.
Bro, it's crazy.
And I was like, you know, the immigrant story is so prominent, especially in music, just because music is always kind of like a universal language that we can lean to. And I leaned to music a little bit later on in my life. Like I was more so focused on like kid stuff, but you know, music was always in the background. But the fact that you talked about music being like a way that you learned English is super powerful. And I've seen that with a lot of people that have traveled, you know, immigrated here, where you know they've learned a lot of the keywords and you know like the culture through music, and that's what's so powerful about it. So I just wanted to kind of like connect the dots because my immigrant story is very similar. I mean, I grew up lower middle class as well, so I know you know how challenging that is. And then you know during that process, like you got Saga continues, you know, you're kind of experiencing Biggie and all these different artists and obviously hip hop. Do you remember like, you know, how music was at your crib, like in terms of your siblings, like, because like my parents, you know, they loved jazz music, and my mom in particular loved R&B. So I got put on to like Boys to Men. So that's for me
Nice.
like my favorite genre. Like R&B is my favorite genre. So like I grew up listening to them. How did your parents feel about like you listening to music? Because you know Filipino parents are strict, so
Yeah.
they'd be like, "What are you listening to? It's just all these bad words," you know?
Oh, there was a lot of that for sure. There was a lot of
Yeah,
that in the beginning. You know, my parents were like purely they loved OPM. which for the room, I guess, is original Philippine music. I don't, the way I categorize it is like, it's just very like loving and somewhat depressing
Yep.
love story type of music that you'll see in like telenovelas and and rom-coms. But you know,
Yeah.
they were very frequent listening to that, right? They listen to a lot of OPM, but then they would listen to Michael Jackson because Michael Jackson was so big in the Philippines. So they
Yep.
understood kind of like how big of like a culture changer music was, as far as just like being in love with artists and being a part of the fandom. Because they would tell, like, they would talk about stories of like, yeah, Michael would tour in the Philippines and like EDSA would just be shut down, or like, don't sorry, like, let me, like, Makati, Manila, Philippines would just be shut down, and it would just be like
Yeah.
everyone would, they
Right.
wouldn't know how to move. So they understood kind of the intricacies of like being in love with artists and being in love with music. But when it came to hip hop, they really weren't like, they weren't like, I wouldn't say they weren't against it. They just didn't really understand it, and it took them like a
Right.
minute for me to like educate
Right.
them and actually teach them stuff. But they've always just been supportive. They let me play the music out loud, so I took that as just like, you guys are cool with this, I'm just
Oh,
gonna keep it
nice.
moving. Yeah, no, they never stopped it. They never like knocked on the door like, yeah, hey, turn that off, there's bad words. They were just like, I let him, like, he's staying in his room, he's staying out of trouble, he's listening to music, and I'll come out the next day, I'll know a new phrase. So for them, they were just kind of like, look, if this is his way of coping with moving here, let him cope. Let him kind of dive into it.
I love hearing that. And just for the room, like music is massive in the Philippines. Like if you don't have a karaoke machine in your at your crib, I'm questioning your Filipino heritage. I feel like
Facts.
Filipino families have karaoke machines. They love
Like, bro, we're
karaoke. They love
musical people,
music.
bro. We're such musical people, and I think I love that about Filipinos. Is just like, no matter what part of the world you are, no matter where your family immigrated to, like, that one connect. Like, we really do love music. Like, we really do love it. We enjoy it, and I think that's the beautiful part about our culture a lot, that we've kind of grown to even more now as time moves on. It's like you're really seeing our love for music is so genuine.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I just want to just reiterate that Filipinos love music, and we're definitely products of it. Um, so you're listening to Saga Continue, you're listening to hip hop. You know, what is like? Do you remember? Kind of like your first show, or like in high school? Like, what was music for you in high school? Like, how did you share music? How did you consume music? Um, because it was a different time from streaming now. So
Yeah. Shout out to Kazaa, man.
yes.
Shout out to
Kazaa.
Kazaa. Learn out, yeah. Everything, and it's funny, bro. Having this conversation, you just kind of start seeing things in hindsight. But it's like even back then, we were so digitally savvy. Like, I learned how to use Kazaa. Like, how are we supposed to know that? Like, no one taught us that. We were just like roaming around, AOL internet trying to like figure it out. But
Yeah.
yeah, Kazaa, LimeWire, FrostWire, all of that, did all of that.
Hmm.
But it was an interesting shift though. By the time I got to like, call it like middle school, high school, I started experimenting making music. So I was an artist from
Mm.
there on. But by the time I was like 13, 14 years old, I was chasing to be I was actually trying to be an artist for real. Like, I was making music, I was putting music out, I was touring, I was
Wow.
battling all over Jersey and some parts of New York. Like, I was really honestly trying to make music at that point in time. Was so inspired by just kind of like everything I was picking up from it, and felt like I had a story to tell. And I fell in love with it. So I started making music. I wanted to be an artist all the way through. Like, I was absolutely obsessed with it.
Yeah, talk about that, because you know, maybe that first moment, or first show, or you talked about like traveling, because like once you get the bug, it's like you want to
Yeah.
hit the stage everywhere else. So where was that inspired by, and like how did you kind of try to find your sound, and what was that experience like?
It was it was like, it came as I was growing as a human and as a person. I think that was the beautiful part of it, is because I was like learning about myself. I was figuring out what I was passionate about, what I wanted to do. And I really believe it. Like, any human, you got to find something to fall in love with. You have to be passionate about something, whatever it is. It's just a way for you to keep your life going and keep your, keep kind of your days moving. So
Yeah.
and that was it, bro. Like I really, I fell in love with writing. I started battling. That was kind of a thing. Like we battled in lunch rooms and gym class. Like it was a thing. Like it was just a part of my community here
Yep.
where I grew up. Like we just battled, bro. We battled in lunch. Like everyone rapped. Everyone tried to rap. But we took it like a step further because we actually, and I think once again, in hindsight, we were just so digitally savvy. We learned how to like record music, you know, through like, I think at that point it would have not been GarageBand,
Yeah.
not at all. It was the first iteration of like GarageBand for Macs. It might have been GarageBand now that I think about it. But I think so, right? Something like that. But we learned how to record music.
Yeah,
And we learned,
I remember that.
yeah, so we learned how to record music. I linked up with like producers that were trying to produce. We were like 13, 14, but at this point, you're looking for something to be passionate about. We're thinking this is your freshman in high school. You're looking for things, man. You want to explore and kind of like find something you're in love with. And we just had this nice community. It was like 3 or 4 of us that made music. We all went to one kid's house to record music. And at this point in time, MySpace was coming up. Friendster was a thing, Zanga was a thing. We were in
Yep.
very early stages of YouTube. So we're like, okay, cool. Not only can we like record music, now we also got a distribution for it too. Now it's not a problem. Like now we're like, all right, cool, man. Like let's just like let's go put this out. Let's go ahead and learn that. But I think as an independent artist, especially if you're an immigrant here, which means you don't have a budget and you're
Right.
13, 14, what are you thinking about? You're not thinking about no budget, bro. You're just like, I want to put this out, right? You start picking up the other skill sets. And that's where kind of how this connects to me now. Cause it's like, you start picking up skill sets because I got to do the single art. Got to learn how to use paint and or Photoshop, right? Like, oh, I gotta, you
Free.
need that. I need photos. I need photos. Great, yo, homie here. Can you just start taking photos of me in whatever camera you or your family member has? That homie turns out to be, like the best photographer in the game right now. You know what I'm saying? Like I have friends that picked up their first camera shooting me, who is now Sam Balabin with his photo over here. Just another plug.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's how the community grows. So it's, we start picking these things up. I want to do my own music videos. I start picking up how to edit videos on Premiere, or at that point was Final Cut, like just because that was like the program we had, but once again, being digitally savvy and then having the passion to put out music introduced me to these other skill sets that I was just like getting better and better at. As I was like putting out more music, I was getting better at graphic design. I was getting, because repetition. So that was just how it all, that became, now that I think about it, was the best thing to happen to me, was me wanting to be an artist. Because I learned everything I needed to learn. I learned how to write a press release. I learned how to update a website, because you're doing it yourself, bro. You got to do it yourself at that point,
Yeah.
But you don't realize, and I think, well, I don't want to jump the gun, but it's like you realize it's like, oh, that's a job. That's a job. That's a job. I could get a 401k from that too. And you're like, holy shit, I got a career. But being a musician, that gave me that, that spark to learn and just pick up new ways to develop my skill set and put my music out. And it really taught me how to do everything that I'm doing now, which is crazy to say, but it really did.
I love to hear that, just because you basically just, as an artist, just jumped in the deep end and learned how to swim. And I think for a lot of folks, whether, and this is a lesson learned, I think for a lot of folks that are trying to start something, they think they have to wait on people. You can start with your group of friends and just put ideas out and test ideas out. Like you were 13, on Zanga, MySpace, and didn't care, and you just wanted to make sure you promoted your music. You were figuring things out, being digitally savvy, and the resources are there. You just got to just take that first step, and you were doing that. So I just want to just share that for the community, because don't wait, just do it.
Don't at all.
So I just
especially now, bro. Especially now in 2021, like you have so many tools around you. You have so many ways to go get started at your dream and get started to fulfilling whatever you have inside you, the desire for you to kind of get whatever you need. There's so many tools out there now, man. It's like, if back then when we were like messing around with MySpace and like, you know, phone line internet connections, like, man, if there was a way back then, now, oh man, there's no excuses, bro.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there's no excuses at all, you know? Like, you can really get started and go chase your dream for real. It's not a, there's no roadblocks anymore at this point in time.
Right. No, I love that mindset. So for you in your career, right? So you're 13. Um, what was that journey as an artist? And like, what are some of those challenges that you started to face? You know, because like you're doing this independently, you're, you know, you're navigating with your friends and just kind of just like figuring things out. What were those initial challenges? And then when did you start to kind of pivot from that artist role? Um,
You kind of, you know, I think it's speaking from at that point in time as an artist, right? Like, I was very, you know, I had a specific approach. I had a sound. There was a, you know,
mhm,
I was big in boom bap. I was trying to, like, you know, and at that point in time, and this is the part that's very interesting, is you sit, you look around at the marketplace, and I hate looking at music this way, but I just gotta say that. You look at the marketplace and you're like,
right.
damn, there is no way with what I'm doing I can actually fulfill like my duties as an immigrant Filipino here in this country. Like, there was a point in time where I was like, I think 18 at that point. I met with a few labels, you know, like there was a
Mhm,
kind of an interesting Asian YouTube community thing happening where there was like Asian rappers that was just pumping out of nowhere. And they were
yep.
like, oh, wait, is there something happening? Is there a wave here? Like, you know, so there was like that. There was during that phase point in time. And I just performed at NYU. It was like really interesting. I performed at NYU and I was just sitting there and I was like, you know, damn, the music I make isn't really like the music that's gonna ever make me rich. Like, for real. Like, I remember sitting there going like, this is gonna stay underground. And it wasn't me being like, you know, a downer. I was just, I at that point is also when I realized, damn, I might actually understand this music business thing. Like, I was like, that was kind of the aha
Mm,
moment where I'm like, oh wait, did I just finally realize that there is an actual music ecosystem and that there's people
mm,
that, you know, could probably survive? Like, you know, in my opinion, with the path I was going after, would I have been able to like feed myself? Probably. Would I have been able to, like, you know, keep myself alive and been able to like live somewhere pretty nicely? Probably. Would I have been able to like pay for my parents' house, you
mhm,
know, send a cousin back home in the Philippines to graduate? I don't know if I was, and look, we'll never know, but where I sat at that point in time, I was like, this is not happening. Right. Like, I looked at
right.
the marketplace, I saw the J. Cole's of the world, the Cuddies of the world, and I'm like, those guys are really making a living. I'm not there. Like, and I was like, I'm not there at all. Like, I don't even make music close to
Mm,
how good that is. Right. Like, I was just like rapping on a
right.
beat. I don't know if this is going to be realistic anymore. And then I went through a tour. I did a tour and
Mm.
it's different, man. Shout out to artists. Shout out to artists and road
Lessons
managers
learned.
and tour managers. Bro, lessons learned. I went through 3 cities and I was like, yep, I'm not built for this. Like, I'm not built for this. Like, you know, I was such a close family person to my mom and my father and my baby sister that I was like, this is hard. Like, I was like, I don't think I can do this for 18 months in a row, you know, and not see my family. I was like, this is
Mm,
kind of difficult. Like, it's, once again, perspective of a Filipino immigrant who came here with a mission. I came here to be able to be the
mhm,
first pillar for my family to be able to survive in America. And then hopefully I bring others from the Philippines, right? That's usually how
right.
this thing works when it comes to immigrants. I was like, I'm shying away from my goal here with my family as like a Salcedo in
Right.
America. This isn't following that path. And I'm like, and for me to make money, once again, understanding the music business, I need to tour. There's no way I'm going to eat from these downloads on iTunes and from these views on YouTube at that point in time
Right.
yet. We didn't have Spotify. So being a streaming star isn't a thing yet, right? Like, this is
Right.
pre Spotify. So you got to tour, you got to be in these festivals to eat, and you got to sell merch to eat. And I was just like, I'm not there yet, you know? So I immediately, like I said, I had an aha moment and I was like, damn, this might not be the path, but wow, do I finally somewhat understand that there is a music business let me go figure this out now. And that's kind of that was the switch in me and in my career and in my path in music that really like kind of, led me to where I'm at now.
Yeah, no, it's that's crazy because we talk about it's not a question of giving up, it's a question of pivoting. Right?
Yeah.
And I just want to just note that because you people need to have those aha moments, and you did. Because sometimes you keep forcing yourself into a situation that doesn't necessarily pan out, and the fact that you kind of you said you looked at the marketplace, you looked at like just kind of your Filipino heritage and approaching it like, hey, is what's going to make me successful? But I could still be successful, but understand that there's the other side of music, which is the business side, which I could tap into. Which
And it's
which
also being
help.
self-aware, man. Like, like you got to be confident enough to be self-aware, right? Because there was never a point in time where I looked at that as like, damn, I failed. Like there was like, even now, like I look at it, I was like, oh, like you have to be, that confidence has to carry with you for you to understand and really kind of look at everything holistic. Like you got to really look at everything holistically, and then you got to look at everything from above. Like there was
Right.
a different mission for me that I was like, okay, I got to take a step back here and really like assess what's going on. And you gotta, there's sometimes where you gotta realize, yo, I might be better at this.
Yeah.
Like, because there was about a year after when I fully like transitioned out into being an artist and really was just like kind of being in the behind the scenes of everything I was doing. And I was like, wow, I'm actually really good at this. Like I was sitting there going like, holy shit, like what did I just realize now? And that
Right.
feeling too is different, bro. Like you could be absolutely, yes, be in love and be passionate about something, but when you finally realize that you're good at something and you're like really good at something, it's a different sort of confidence, because now you're like, okay, I now know where I belong. I now know where I fit in. I now know what my lane is. Now let me go attack. And you got to be self-aware. You got to be able to kind of sit back and breathe and not kind of look at things. Don't look at people looking at things as failures and L's. I know that this is called the L's, but like looking at things as failures is, that
Yeah.
doesn't cross my mind ever. There's never a point where I look at that as like, oh yeah, that was an L. It's not, bro.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, got you. I learned that. Keep it
Yeah.
moving.
That's a
You
lesson.
know,
Yeah.
that's a lesson.
Yeah.
That's a lesson. That's facts.
Yeah, and that's I just want to reiterate for the folks that are pivoting, or like those initial ideas for those that are artists and are seeing opportunities to do something else. That's okay. Like you're not a failure. You're pivoting as long as you get an opportunity to eat off music, go for it. Like be happy because you're part of that. So for you, when you pivoted, you talked about like a year in, you're like, yo, wow, I'm actually good at this. What was those initial roles? Was it a management role? Were you working with the artists? Like, what did you start learning about your skill sets and like you're experiencing now, kind of like wearing a different hat in the music
I
game?
wore every hat possible. That was it. Like I wore every hat possible. I was doing graphic design on a freelance level, with artists that were like really buzzing in the New York scene. And we were very early on, like there's a social graphic design, right? Like that's an actual thing. There's social graphics that if you
Mhm.
work in digital, you understand what I'm talking about. Back then, like I guess that wasn't a thing. So like
Everything.
I was, bro, like yeah, like a couple of years ago, it wasn't a thing. So I was like making social banners. I was like designing websites. I was doing .coms for people. But you immediately realize something, right? Like I remember working with an artist and we were doing his website. And I go to him, I'm like, all right, bro, yeah, this should be easy. Yo, send me the photos. And he's like, nah, I don't got photos. And I was like, all right, cool, hold up, all right? And I'm like, let me check that in. And I'm like, yo, you got a font in mind, or do you have like do you have a color palette? You want it like black and gray, purple? Like, what is it? I don't know what you're talking about.
Mhm.
One website convo, bro. It was a .com website convo that led to, oh, I'm gonna now do your creative direction, right? Because it went from, well, you don't got photos. We kind of need photos for your website because a landing page would look better if it was your face. All right, cool. I got it. I'll set you up with a photographer. I know a bunch of photographers anyway, right? Because they used to shoot me, or I used to try to tap in
Right.
with them to shoot me as an artist. I got you. Don't even worry about it. I'll bring in a photographer. right? Then you go, yo, hold up, bro. Like you don't know a font. How about this? How's some choices here? You don't got a color palette. Like how's this? Mauve, purple, white, gray, whatever it is. You look at that and you're like, all of a sudden, wait, I'm in a creative director role. So you hired me to make your website, but I'm actually your creative director now, right? And then it gets deeper from that because it goes from when should I launch this
Mhm.
website, right? And then me going, well, you should launch this website around something important. Like, when's your next single coming out? I don't know when my next single's coming out. When should I put it out? Next thing you know, you're
Mhm.
sitting in a management role because you're helping him develop his release strategy. You don't realize these things. 8 months in, I'm like, hold up, bro. Am I like just your website guy, or am I now fully involved with the business of your music? That's kind of when you go, okay, now I get
Mhm.
this. I understand this now. Because at that point, there was no playbook. I didn't understand that. Yeah, I was a young kid. But you see it now, 8 months later,
Right.
you're like, the pieces are put together. Oh, I did that. Obviously, with a lot of brilliant people around me, but oh shit, we did that. We just helped a release strategy out from a website conversation. So I was getting
Right.
paid and not paid. Let me be very clear. There was a lot of times I wasn't paid and I was eating dollar slices, but
Same. Same.
you know how it is, bro. It's music. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like it was just like you did it for the love of it.
Right.
But I was a graphic designer, I was a web designer, I was a manager, I was a press person because I knew how to write press releases. I really just did anything and everything to be involved with artists. And a
Love
lot
that.
of those artists that ended up working with, I wanted to be a value of some sort. I just wanted to be helpful. Whatever it is that you needed, I'm here. And if that started at a website convo and then led to me helping your release strategy, great. However you wanted to use me. I'm here. And that was kind of how I wanted to treat myself. And I was blessed that a few of those artists ended up signing to like major labels, ended up being like
Wow.
the biggest artist in the world, which gave me both the resume and a lot of the beautiful people in those teams that I'm forever thankful for vouched for me for a lot of these label jobs that ended up getting later on, because they were like, no, 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 that dude helped us out, and that gave me an opportunity into the buildings that I'm in now. Because if it wasn't for those artists and their teams, they could have just left me in the dust and kept them moving. They didn't, man. There's a dozen graphic designers and web designers out there. There's millions of people
Right.
that think that they can be a creative director out there, but they looked out, and they were like, yeah, man, that guy. And that ended up being my entry into the building. If it wasn't for a lot of these artists that ended up being probably our favorite artists now, it was beautiful, bro.
Yeah. No, I love that you mentioned that too, where I feel like those experiences, and that's why, you can call them internships or, even like passion projects. I like to say that they're not free, you're paying for experience. And, those are the things that are super important because, to your point earlier, is like, you need to figure out how to like add your value to the artist. And if you don't necessarily like start doing those things and testing those things out, you won't know. Like you may only think like, oh, I'm a digital designer, that's it. But then you start to tap into you for the other ideas. Like, by the way, I actually know how to market. So actually I
Bro,
can do
I
that.
didn't know that was marketing at that point. That was the crazy. Like, I
Yeah.
didn't even realize what the role was or what the job was in like a label or management team structure. I
Yeah.
wasn't like
Same.
privy to that, bro. Like, we don't learn music classes in high school. I didn't have cousins in the industry that knew music and was in the music business. I was just going along with whatever everybody else was doing. So, but yeah, I didn't know that we were like marketing music until like a
Yeah.
year down the line. I'm like, oh shit, this is a job. Got you. Somebody got a title for this. Ah, you know,
And get paid.
and get paid and get 401k and health benefits. I was like, yo, this is beautiful. I was because like we were at that point in time, man, like blog era, coming up through the blog era, and really
Mhm.
anyone that's like a music entrepreneur trying to just be in music, you will do this shit for free. Let's just be completely honest, bro. Like
Mhm.
what I'm doing now, getting paid for, blessed to be able to help my family out back home, help my family here. But I was doing this for free like a couple years ago, bro, and I loved it. I still loved it then. I love it now. But we
Same.
were doing this for free, bro. It was nothing to us. Like it was like, oh, this is a job. This is a job. I used to look at it like that, bro. Like this is a job. That's crazy. Like, I love it. Yeah, 24 hours. Yeah, yeah, keep it moving. I'll work for 18 hours. That's not healthy, by the way. Don't do that. But it was like, that's how I looked at it, because it was like, oh,
Mhm,
this is like how I looked at video games. You know what
mhm.
I'm saying? Or how I looked at like putting a, like a car together. Like I was just like so in love with it that I was like, I don't know what else to do. This is it. I just want to do music, whatever it is.
Yeah, no, and that's super important. And I think, finding your purpose and finding the things that you love really happen naturally, right? I think in your case, you were doing these things for these different artists, and it made sense because like these initial experiences really afforded you to get these label jobs. And I just want to make a note that, whether you're working on that passion project or you're working on a free opportunity for experience, like make sure you make the most of those opportunities and have a really great impression for those folks, right? Whether it's like a bubbling artist or like someone that you really believe in, but a lot of people don't. Like you may design something or create something, and then that artist blows up, and then who knows, 5 years later, you got a job. So it's one of those things where, it really starts from like why you're doing it. And your
Yeah.
why is because you love music. And um, I think that's what I tell a lot of folks, like, why are you doing this? It shouldn't feel like work. It's hard work, yes, but you have to be excited about it because it has to come from somewhere. You shouldn't approach this as a job because it's one of those things where like we like to your point earlier, it's like, man, we get paid to do this and it's crazy, but we love what we do, you
Yeah.
know. So,
Yeah,
so I
no,
just want to
you
reiterate
got
that.
to love it. No, I agree, bro, and I'm glad that you did, because it's like you really do have to just be passionate and love something. Like this isn't, this is, especially music, man. This is like a lifestyle thing. This isn't a clock in, clock out thing, And I still
Mhm.
explain that to my parents. I'll be like, yo, it's 9 o'clock. I'm like, yeah, man, but we moving. I got a couple emails to send and stuff like that, and they'll be like, but it's 9 o'clock, and it's like, but this isn't a clock in, clock out type of job, and that's both the beauty of it and the curse of it. And if you're not in it because you love this, then like it's gonna be very hard, because it is stressful. It 100% is. I'm not saying it is. I don't want to ever downplay how hard it is and how
No,
how
very hard.
difficult the job is. It's a fucking hard job. It's still a job. You feel me? And there's a lot of people that depend on you, especially brilliant artists that have put their lives into their art and craft. So there's also that pressure that you can't be the one that fucked that up for the guy that's risking everything for their art, right?
Right.
So it's a hard job, but like you don't view it that way when you love it. You don't view it that way when you're passionate about it, and when you just live and breathe it. It's I actually like think that that's how you make it successful in this, in my opinion. Like you really just gotta be a part of it as a real lifestyle, for sure.
Yeah, I want to reiterate that. Make sure, like, it's part of your culture. It doesn't end immediately. And I think you spoke about it earlier, like, not being able to like tap out after 9. And some things, artists are beautiful, people, but they're also their teams and they're also demanding. So, we work in a results driven business, and that's part of it. Like that's part of the game. So
Yeah.
we understand that. So I want to like go into two things. One, before we go into like really talking about that first win to help kind of like change your trajectory, but I want to go into like the fashion space because you're tapped into the fashion world. I remember, when we first spoke, you had like a fashion line and
Yeah.
and a brand that you were working on. So where did that come about? During this time as you're like consulting artists on creative direction and so forth. I just want to just kind of talk about that. Like how that come about.
The fashion stuff started when I was an artist,
Okay.
because of merch. Yeah, I learned how to like make merch, and that was really it. Like I learned how to make merch for myself and I wanted to keep that going, because when I finally kind of cut, or was like on my way out of music, or at least being an artist, I was like, damn, I fell in love with production. There's something different. I think, and a lot of people that make stuff, and I hopefully this doesn't come off incorrectly for the musicians. There's something about like holding something, right? Like this, I made this, right? I designed it. There's
Wow.
something different about like making something on Photoshop or Illustrator, and then getting it as a
Physical.
product you can hold. Yeah, bro, it's different. There's a completely different feel. So when I was making merch, For myself, I fell in love with that process, the whole production process of like designing, speaking to, you know, different manufacturers, finding cotton, finding like different fabrics, and like learning the silhouettes of like fashion design. I fell in love with it from making merch. So I wanted to just
Wow.
keep that bug going. So you know, as I was kind of making my exit out of being my own music of being a musician, I was like, I want to keep that going. Started a brand, and you know that we just wanted to, you know, to get that sort of creative field out there. We wanted to kind of get that creative spurt out there, was fashion design and making clothes. So I ended up, you know, obviously like using that as well as a service. So as I met
Mm.
artists that were like, hey, we want to, you know, like I said, start with graphic design, start from
Yep.
there. You determine a font on a website, most likely, and most brand decks you get, that's probably going to be the font consistent across everything else, including your merch. So it was such an easy kind of service to provide people because I controlled everything. I had all of the layered files. I had all of, you know what I'm saying? Like you had, like, this
You
is
had all
so
that. You
dirty
had
to
all
say,
the
like, bro,
assets.
all exactly. You and me are the only, we look crazy right now because no one else is like, why are they laughing about layered files? It's like, because you know when you need layered files and you haven't gotten it, it's like the
Yes.
worst thing for that week. But I had all of
PSD,
the
please.
yeah, like yeah, send it. You got the JPEG, great. PSD too with the fonts. Don't forget the fonts. Make sure you attach the fonts.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh man, that's hilarious. But nah, so I had all of it. So I was just, I ended up kind of making clothes, designing clothes. I had a team with me, a lady
Mm.
Kim, and then we had two people that at that point in time were working in Jack Threads. One is Jared, that now works for Lycan and owns Lycan, which is a furniture store in Brooklyn. And then the
Oh,
other is Good Habit, who's a photographer out of Brooklyn. So we just created this collective, and we kept designing clothes. Even till now, we still like would make clothes and try to pitch it to retailers and people to hopefully buy it. It's a difficult game, man. That's the one thing I'll probably like, the comparison with music and fat, or trying to break in both as an entrepreneur. So hard, bro. Just the distribution aspect is very difficult. And then the creation process is hard too, right? Because it might take you from the time you design something, from the time you have the tech pack for it, to the time that you like source the materials and then produce it. We're looking at a good, especially us, like I'm not made of money, so I don't have production like that where I can just turn things around in a week. Like
right.
we're talking like I'll get a hoodie, it'll have taken 2 months to make that thing, right? And then I'll wake up to it 2 months later and be like, damn, the button is wrong. I'm like, fuck, I gotta redo this whole thing, you know. So it's like there's that part of the fashion side is very difficult, just because for you to get stuff made, you actually got to like wait. Where in music, because of the internet, because we're so
Mhm.
digitally centered, that
Mhm.
like, bro, someone can wake up at 10 a.m., be inspired by noon, record it, mix it by 3, put an Instagram post up by 4, and have it out on SoundCloud and YouTube by 6, and they're good to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
And they're good to go, bro. And they're straight and they're rocking. And they can do it again the next day, and then do it again the next day, and then keep going until they make it. Where it's like it might take me 2 months to get a hoodie back for me to realize, fuck, man, this doesn't look like the way I envisioned it. Let's go back to the drawing board. Next thing you know, 6 months has passed, and you're like, fuck, 6 months passed. And if you work in fashion, you work through 2 seasons. You work through fall,
Mm.
winter. You work
Right.
through autumn, spring. So you fuck up your winter line. You wake up in spring. You're like, shit, I gotta get started on my spring line, and then hold this, reassess it, put it out in the next coming winter and fall. It's a cycle that makes it a little bit difficult just because of production.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that. Which I'm actually gonna plan to do again. We had a merch convo yesterday, and it was
I tuned in.
I know.
It was a
I
good
was. I
one.
saw.
It
I
was a
was.
good one.
I wanted to bring you up. It was. Yeah. It's just very challenging to, especially for artists. But I think obviously there's more tools. But when you talk about hoodies that you're talking about, that's more cut and sew,
Yeah, yeah,
versus like the standard like hoodies that people can
yeah.
get at like a Champion or
Yeah.
something. So
But by the way, that's still a process too.
it
Go
is.
you
It
you
is a
you go
process.
buy go buy a Gildan blank or some Champion blank or All Style or whatever it is. It's
Yeah.
still gonna take you 2.5 weeks for you to design that, drop it off at an embroiderer or some screen printer, for them to
Mhm.
squeeze in 25 hoodies for them to screen print and send back to you. That doesn't happen overnight. That's still a good week and a half, 2 week process. That's probably gonna cost you $600 to $750 depending on the design, right? Like it's,
Right.
like it's still even the 101 of merch is still a fucking task, and
Yeah.
it's still a job, and it's still very much a process for you to do, and it's worth it at the end if you get it right. But it's not no laughing matter. That is an actual, like, a hard job to pull off, for sure.
It is a hard job, and we'll go into that in a different segment,
Yeah.
but definitely for the artists, make sure to tap in your merch game, because if you're not, you're missing out on some bread. Just gonna
Yes.
say
Yes,
with that.
sir.
Just
That's
gonna say
true.
with that. So you talked about the fashion space, kind of like creating these opportunities for artists on the merch game. But for you, like, as you got your first label gig and like people co-signing you, talk about maybe two things. One, those initial challenges, because you're freelancing at one point. Now you're working with more of these corporations. What are those initial challenges? And then two, how did you just like being Filipino. And I think this is something that I experienced too, like, working at a label, like there's not many of us in kind of like the representation. So how did you like kind of like really position yourself um during those like the first label jobs?
I mean, the first thing, I think it's, you immediately realize that, like, a corporation at the end of the day is a corporation. There's hierarchies, there's a system in place, there's people. And coming from being like an independent music entrepreneur, especially like my path where I was used to doing everything, I was
Mhm.
like, I was stepping on people's toes, I was knocking walls, I was like, oh shit, my fault, bro. But like, it was so
Sorry.
honest. But yeah, exactly though. But I was honest about it, right? Like, I think that was the thing that I've always carried with me and kind of wore, like, right there in front of everybody. It's like, I'm not here for bad intentions. I'm not here to, like, be a someone that creates a mess. I'm here to be a resource, and I'm here to be helpful. I'm sorry if I, like, accidentally walk into your space, but just understand that, like, there's an energy from independent music entrepreneurs like me that maybe that at that point the building hasn't seen yet. But I
Mhm.
made it very, like, clear in the beginning. Like, I'm not here to, like, be a bad person. I'm not here doing anything maliciously. I'm just here very passionate and really ready to contribute. So use me. That's how I position myself. Like, use me. What do you need? Because, like, understand that I can do that. Right? Like, oh, your art department is booked because they're doing more important things, like the vinyl for David Bowie. You need what? You need that? Yo, man, I got Photoshop. Pass that over. I'll do it. Not part of my job description. All good. I'm here to help you. Right. And
Mm.
that really helped me out in the building a lot, because people, one, were just like, the kid works, right? Like, he's a very hard worker, which people always appreciates, in my opinion,
Right.
everywhere you go. If you are a grinder, if you are that person that really goes above and goes to the extra mile, you will be
Yeah.
remembered. People really will take, will definitely love you for it. Yes, there's a few people I'll probably be like, he's doing a little too much. But there's that 1 out of 10 that will go so hard for you because you went hard. And that one out of
Mhm.
10 might end up
Yeah.
being the president of the label one day,
Yeah.
So, like, that's, you got to put your best foot forward. And at the same time, I didn't want to go to sleep at night not knowing I was doing my best. That was the thing I couldn't live
Mm.
myself with, right? Like, I wanted to go to sleep at night going, I put 150% of my effort into this. I was very competitive. I was aggressive in making sure that the things needed to be, to cross the line. And
Right.
people respected that. People loved it. And people, in my opinion, at least from my perspective, and I hope I'm not wrong, they loved working with me because of it. Because
Right.
there was always an energy of like, yeah, what's next? What should we do? What should we do? Yeah, I got you. Yeah, let me do that. Right. There was this excitement that I think created this, like, atmosphere around me that I hope, or at least now looking back on it, I think people loved that, because I think it wasn't common at that point in time, and I'm
Right.
blessed now that I think about it. Like, and I think it was that would be my suggestion to people, man. Whatever you're going into, whatever building you're going into, yo, just, like, really, really work hard and grind your ass off and show off your skill set. Like, show people what you can do. Like,
Right.
really show people what you're capable of. No matter if you were just hired to write copy, like, and you were kind of like minimalized here, like, show people, tell people, yo, I can do this, I can do that, I can contribute
Mm.
here, because that's the type of way for you to kind of break through. And at the
Right.
same time, you want to tell people that, man, you got to be proud of your skills, you know. So that was how I approached it. I was like, I'm just gonna do everything I can, and I'm here to help. And they accepted that, and I'm blessed that they did.
No, that's huge. And I just want to just reiterate that you said, like, just don't do what's in your job description. Uh,
Yeah.
Add value wherever you can. You talked about, I was like, all right, yeah, let me hit that artwork real quick. Um, and I think to your point too is like bringing that energy. You're coming from a good place, and I think it's just the way you deliver that energy, where you just want to help and add value. And you talked about like working hard, where you didn't want to sleep at night, not knowing that you were able to deliver that. So I think those are like important things to just recognize for a lot of the young folks that are watching. You know, how you could add value and not just get so complacent about just like what you're doing and what you're supposed to be doing. Um,
Yeah.
and then my
I
second
forgot the
question
second
was,
part. It was the second question. Yeah, sorry.
yeah, so for you, just like being just a Filipino in music, like you're not the artist anymore. You're behind the scenes and kind of like navigating in that space. Like, what are some of the things that you were trying to do just to just navigate, and how did you connect with folks? And obviously we connected eventually later on, but with other like Asian Americans or Filipinos in music.
There was a conversation that happened actually. This was really like it was kind of like eye opening because when we're tunneled in and like I've met you, so when you're tunneled in, sometimes you kind of just don't see anything else around you, especially when you're working on a lot of things.
Right.
But there was an international conference. I was at the international marketing department over at Sony at that point, so I was doing international for Columbia Records. So like
Right.
my role was essentially breaking US artists ex-US. More specifically, I was like really focused on trying to break hip hop in the US outside of the US. So, so that was kind of like my, what I was trying to work on, or at least that was like my goal. And we had an international conference, and every single Sony Music office was in New York,
Wow.
including Sony Music Philippines, the one representative, one solo,
Wow.
singular representative of Sony Music Philippines that was actually a part of what at that point in time was like, I think Sony Music Southeast, or it was like they were a hub. It wasn't
Southeast
like they even
Asia.
had, yeah, they didn't even have like an actual office yet at that point. It was just like one representative, right? And we spoke. Like first time I spoke to anybody in Tagalog. Like this, I just got to paint the picture for people. Yo, finding Filipinos is hard enough. Finding Filipinos
Hmm.
that can speak fluently in your native tongue is
Right.
hard, especially in the music
Yeah.
industry. So hard. So it tripped
Yeah.
me out because I did a presentation on, now I think about it, it was on social media and how it could help break artists. So this was like
Hmm.
2016. And
Yeah.
met her. She called me out and she started talking to me in Tagalog. And she was like, it's so good to see somebody in here. Right. And she like gave me so much just like hope. Like she was like, this is great. Cause like I hope people understand now that like one, we can play in these fields, but you can make a difference. Like she like painted this picture for me, like you can make a difference. Like you're a Filipino in the
Right.
building. You know how many Filipino artists are out there? Like she just like started talking to me in a way that I never conversed with anyone before. Where she's like, you can hire Filipino creatives. You know how many Filipino creatives are out there? Like she
Right.
was like telling me all of these things. It's like, we're gonna open a Sony Music Philippines soon in a couple of years. Like,
Wow.
like it's gonna be great when we do that because we're finally gonna have a representative of the Philippines in these buildings. And she really was like so passionate about it. And then now that I think about it, she was the only Filipino ever at that point.
Yeah.
So she was seeing something that I didn't even see. And then I was like, oh, thanks. Like, appreciate you, mabuhay. Like I was just like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we stayed in touch. But that conversation like kind of put things in perspective for me in a different way. Because then I saw like a higher purpose. I saw like not to be like super like weird about it, but like I saw like a different purpose after that conversation because I was like, okay, I get what you're saying now. And years down the line, you said it. I don't see Filipinos often. That's why me and you click so much because it's like, such a breath of fresh air to finally be able to like relate with somebody that's also in the same space.
Yeah.
But you're like, damn, what can I do here? Like, what can I do for my people? You start looking at it like that. Like, well, how can I contribute? So the same way I was like, how can I be a resource to artists? Now, how can it be a resource to Filipinos? What can I do
Right.
in the position that I'm sitting now? What can I really do? And then that's where the job part came in, because I started kind of seeing what type of opinion I can have in a label. And that's when I started seeing like, okay, I can plug in there, I can plug Filipinos there, I can, at least I can at least pitch a Filipino director here, right? Or
Right.
oh, you guys are listening to new music, yo, here's a Filipino artist. Like
Yeah.
at least someone being there to do that, at least for me, it makes, I feel like we're it's inches, it's minuscule steps, but that voice wasn't there a couple years ago. That voice wasn't there 2 years ago. That voice wasn't there 3 years
Right.
ago. Like now we're actually, at least somebody's there being able to at least, hey, like we're here, we exist, like take a look. And if you don't like it, it's fine. But here, like at least give us a shot for you to pay attention, And that's how I ended up seeing it. And that conversation really like it opened up everything for me, and then it became even more weird. Like we ended up being one of the top streaming countries in the world. Like,
Yeah.
we ended up being a case study country. So if you blow up in the Philippines, you might blow up everywhere else in the world. Like it became a hub. Like all of a sudden we're the top social media country in the world.
Hmm.
How are most of these artists being found now? Through socials. All of a sudden you're like, wait, hold up. I'm here. There's people in these buildings of Filipino descent that can make a difference in the Filipino music industry. I'm like, oh, I see now why you told me this 5 years
Hmm.
ago now, 4 years ago. Like now I get why you were saying that, because you saw what the land could be if you had proper players in the right positions. And it became an eye opener. And until now, bro, like that's like a circled in my bucket list. Like we're gonna bridge that gap. We're gonna bridge that gap for sure.
Yeah. No, it's super important, man. I mean, just like, I think even for me, I think you could probably attest to this. I think growing up, as far as like roles or like, after college, study hard, you have to, take these traditional roles, right? Whether it's being a nurse or working for like a corporation in terms of like a bank or something, or some type of like, you take your master's and you got to do all these other things. And that just doesn't fit for everybody. And I think for a lot of Filipinos, they're very creative. They want to tap into that creative part of their brain. And I think for people like us, like you start as an artist and you kind of pivoted into these different roles. And to be able for other folks and young, just Asian Americans or people to see in Filipinos to see us in these positions where like, hey, even though my parents are telling me to do something else, but I really love this, but they're doing that. Wait, I could do that too. And people just want to see themselves in those positions. And I think
Yeah.
we have a different responsibility in addition to like all the other things that we're doing, just because there aren't many of us in these type of roles. So
Yeah, I think
uh,
seeing people in them is that I hope could at least like open the gap up, And I've mentioned this before. Like I do think a lot of it is also generational, right? So it's
mhm,
like you if you are like me, like a pure immigrant here, came here when you were like 10 or 11. It sucks to say this, and I hate to say this, but it's like you kind of don't have a choice. You take a risk. Like I said,
mhm,
you're carrying a lot of people with you, and most, I don't know if most immigrant kids ever learn that until they get older. You didn't get sent here by accident. Like you were decided on. Like I remember when I first found that out from my family, like, nah, you got picked because you got to help back home. So
mhm,
when you have those sort of like family pressures because you are an immigrant here, taking a chance on a job that no one knows anything about is a hell of a risk, not just for
huge.
you, but for your parents that sacrificed to come here, for your family back home that's hoping that you can, help them out as well. That's a
Mhm,
hell of a risk, right? And us coming up, we just never saw it. I just didn't see it. Like in general, I didn't even know music jobs was a thing. I didn't know you can eat from that. I didn't know you can pay your bills from that. So I'm like you said, like I'm hoping people see this and they're like, oh, that is a job. Like that is an actual career,
yeah.
because we're not taught that growing up. Because let's be honest, our parents didn't know. My
Right.
mom wouldn't know that. My mom wouldn't know that there
Right.
was a marketing manager behind her favorite album that she grew up listening to. How
Right.
would they know that? They wouldn't know that. That's just how the world works. So
Right.
that's how I always looked at it. Was just like there's certain pressures that are put upon us, so we don't get to have the opportunity or the privilege. Let's just keep it a buck. We just don't have the privilege to look outside of the window of
Right.
the box that we're in because we need to provide for our family. So now what I hope is people do see it, people do understand it with the help of the internet, for example, you can now realize like, oh, the head of that company is Filipino. He didn't take a regular path. Or,
Hmm.
the top graphic designer for Nike didn't take a regular quote unquote Filipino path. Like that now exists. I want people to understand that, Filipinos specifically too. Like you are in America. Yes,
Right.
this place is everywhere right now. This place is a mess, but you are in America. Like you 100%, if you really work hard and like grind, could take any path you want in whatever career you want. Like it's
Right.
possible. I've seen somebody in love with ducks make a career out of ducks. I didn't know that that was a thing. It sounds crazy to say that, but
Yeah.
like that's real. Like people are making careers out of what we would never consider to be a career. Like there's
Right.
other paths out there, so chase it and really work hard. There's a way to make a check in this country from that. Like, and I learned that. That's the one thing I learned about this country that I ended up falling in love with. Yo, Cam said it. Cameron said it. If you can't make money in an earth this big, you're worthless, kid. Like that's for real. Like you can really make money out here from things you're in love with if you just like find your niche and work hard. So hopefully people pick that up.
Yeah. Man, I love the passion about what you just delivered because because I feel you, and I think we could like attest. There are a lot of huge social pressures for a lot of immigrant kids. I mean, you came here, when you were 10, and I just want to recap real quick. Came here with 10, right? You entered the school system. You talk about ESL, like you learned English through music, through hip hop, and then you talked about like not wanting to like take those ESL classes because of the social pressures of just being singled out, and that's very hard, especially coming in as a 10-year-old from a different country. But I love the fact that you talked about learning how to speak English through hip hop and music, so that has to be its own course, like in terms of like language courses. But I also want to also talk about too, where you talked about those initial projects that really spawn your love for music. The saga continues. You talked about Diddy, and you're like, well, what else? If this is a saga, what else happened? So you know so you talked about your love for Biggie, and like your parents didn't care that you listen to hip hop. We grew up in strict households, so we know that every Filipino parent is very unique. So they didn't care, but they supported you because they were big fans of Michael Jackson and music like that. Fast forward, 13 years old, you're like you're becoming an artist. You're like in school, like battling. You're creating your MySpace. You're putting your music on like Zanga and all that. You're figuring it out. And we were talking about earlier, like just taking those initial steps because you love it, and just trying to like because you're passionate about it. You're in this like boom bap space. Fast forward, you're 18, and you're like three shows in, and then you have that aha moment, and you're just like, and which is not wrong, and it's important to recognize, have that self-awareness that we spoke about, where you're just like, man, this marketplace, music, I don't know where this is going to fit, but I'm going to pivot. So I love that you talked about pivoting at the NYU show, and then you start a year later, working with your friends. You start like designing, websites, and you're what we called before just like a graphic designer for everything. You're
The
designing everything.
Photoshop guy, the Photoshop guy. They're like, oh,
You're the
yeah, that
Photoshop
guy.
guy.
He's
Yeah, that
Photoshop.
guy.
That guy.
He knows how to create marketing plans too. And while you're at it, he'll create your merch. And then, just tapping into that and how your role, where you talked about adding value, where you're just like, okay, I could do this, I could do that. And how your relationships with those artists allow you to be in positions to like get those label gigs. And then we fast forward where you're at those label gigs and you're like, man, how do I like really stand out? And you talked about not just doing what's in your job description. You're just like, how can I add value to you? Like, you're stepping on toes, but accidentally, and you're just like bringing that energy because you want to like do your best work, and you talked about like not sleeping at night, not knowing that you didn't do your best work, which is like a big lesson learned. And now you talked about your Filipino heritage and how that's important to you, like meeting that Filipino rep, that only one Filipino rep that was so happy to connect with you, and how like we have a social responsibility to like make sure we pay it forward, for those that are underrepresented, to create those opportunities, because we need more representation. But now that here we are, fast forward in the present, VP of digital over at Columbia Records. We did a whole journey.
Nice.
What what is like the biggest lesson learned for you, out of all these, experiences, and something that you want to share with the audience as we wrap up this episode?
Artist comes first, always.
Man.
The artist comes first. That's how it always is. I think me being an artist in my early stages of my career in music allowed me to be in the same wave as them. I understand, or at least I would like to think that I understand how they think. I understand what they're going through. I understand the pressures they're going through, which allows me to do my job better, right? Because now I also know, yeah, bro, you just did 8 hours of promo. Yeah, me asking you for a tweet is probably not going to be smart for me to ask right now. Let me ask you
Yep.
that tomorrow morning,
Right.
right? Or like when I call you or when I check in with you, let me actually talk to you on a daily basis and not just hit you up once a week with a, hey, can you do this? Because we have this partner, or because of this campaign, right? Like these are things that I wanted that sort of conversation with me when I was coming up as an artist.
Yeah.
Like that's how I wanted to be approached. I wanted to be humanized. I wanted to be regular when you speak to me. I didn't want to just be a job or feel like a job. Like, and artist comes first. That's where it comes down to. The artist comes first. We are helpers of these brilliant people.
Yeah.
And we are resources, and we are a guide, and we are, sometimes a graphic designer, sometimes a therapist, sometimes a web designer,
All the above.
sometimes your content person, right? But at the end of the day, the artist comes first, and we are here to support them because they're the ones putting it all out in the line, for real. Like it is so difficult to be an artist. A lot of what they're going through is a lot that we would probably never go through or will ever experience. And I want that to go back. We have to go back to 2021, where it's like, yo, executives, managers, you are not the star. Like we are the people that are supposed to help artists get to the pinnacle of their vision. And that's where it always comes down to. If you keep that in mind, if you stay pure to helping artists out and helping people out, which is also the part about this that becomes weird, because people are like, yeah, I want to help artists. Well, do you even like helping people out in the first place? Because this is what this is at the end of the day.
That's
like
a different
this
combo.
is really just about helping people out, right?
Yeah.
Helping people get their dreams out into the world. And if they happen to be musicians, that's how we help them out, right? Like if that's where you are, the purest of your cores, you just want to help people out, you want to be a resource to an artist, you're going to be good. And that's the one thing I learned from all of this, from my whole journey, is that, I am here to help artists out. I am here to be an artist helper. And, that's where it is. That's where I fit. That's my purpose here. And, that helped me throughout my career. Like that was always my center, no matter what label gig I was in, no matter what executive I was in, I was kept it with what did the artist feel, where does the artist stand on this, and how do they envision this conversation, and then we can go from there. But it always starts at the artist.
Man, that's so important, and probably the most important thing, especially for our roles or anyone that's working on and behind the scenes. And you could sense that for the folks that really prioritize artists, right? You talked about, building those relationships and not approaching them as robots, being able to manage moods, because that's the art, and just understand like how to read situations and understand like, you're not going to always get the best of your artists every day, but if you build a relationships, they're going to trust you. And I think that's the most important thing, like building that trust for an artist, because you can get so much done because you're all in it together. And but I just want to like reiterate that artist first for the room. And just more importantly, thank you, man. This was a really fun convo. We haven't had a chance to like really go into like, your journey and the way that you got here. Like I said, people see like titles, they see like what we're doing now, but they don't know how we got there. And everyone has such a really cool story to tell. I just want to thank you again. I'm going to make sure for the community, make sure to tap in and follow John Vincent Salcedo. We're going to make sure he has his socials, like, comment, subscribe. For the Digital Art community, thank you so much. This is episode 26 of the L's Lessons Learned. We got some more dope people to come up that we're going to tell stories for, but make sure to connect with John after this and stay tuned. Peace, y'all.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks, guys.
One love.